This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
This is pretty good. We've got a table full of decoys here, but the best aren't on this table yet. I'll say that right now. So guys, we gotta talk turkeys because we got them sitting here on the table. Again, real quick, great thank you and welcome into the Hunters Hunt Nebraska cabin. That is once more wherever you might be listening to us, whatever platform you might be using. We appreciate it. That's Jeff, Hunter, Jackson, and myself, Hershey. We are here to talk all things hunting and here in the state of Nebraska. That means turkeys right now.
It's turkey season.
It definitely means turkeys here. It's gonna be hard to talk about anything else until either we're done turkey hunting or they tell us we can't turkey hunt anymore.
We've been purposely putting off turkeys.
I know.
It's been rough too. Because
Yeah.
I remember the conversation. We can't talk too much about turkeys. And here we are, finally getting back to turkey.
Finally, 3 in a row. We've done 3 in a row on
That's
turkeys.
not enough.
So
Not enough.
We're gonna see how that happens. But again, make sure you give us a subscribe, a like on the Facebook page, but also make sure you give us the thumbs up on your preferred audio platform, or if you're watching us on YouTube, do that as well so you know when the next one drops. We are going to talk more turkeys, and we're going to talk about decoys. Decoys have come a long way.
Thank God.
They have started out
in some regards.
Well, yeah, I would say that that's the truth. Definitely been in the right direction for the most part, but we're going to kind of dive into it just a little bit and see if that's always a good thing, because I know we all probably go through periods where we use decoys and times when we leave them at home. Yep. We don't even take them out with us. The price points have definitely increased, as well as the realism in some of these birds, and we'll talk on both sides of that. But just think about it. This is the oldest one I was able to find here in the office today, an old foam hen decoy. Now she looks a whole bunch better than the original decoys did. I've got one, I guess, at the house was part of a flock. Have you ever noticed that in decoy terminology, a flock is usually 3, and then you've got the pair. You oftentimes buy them in pairs now with the Jake and a hen.
So 1 is a single, 2 is a pair, 3 is a flock.
I think so.
There it is, right there.
Yeah.
No, that's official.
Yeah, I think it's as official as it's going to get. But I remember getting the flock, 2 hens and a Jake, Hunter, and it didn't look near as good as this decoy right here that I'm holding. Which, folks, well, try to describe that, Hunter, because I'm not going to do any good.
It's a very grayish decoy foam. Lots of misshapenness because it's foam and looks like it's been used quite a bit.
Just ugly. Just
throughout
ugly.
the year. Yeah,
It's just
ugly would be
ugly decoys.
that looks about what I started hunting with. So anything prior to that, you guys are going to have to elaborate on because I don't know the history of turkey decoys beyond that.
Well, the first one that I remember, the head stopped about halfway up on this and just looked like it was out of a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, to be quite honest with you. Had a neat little smile on its face to let the real turkeys, those toms, know that everything's okay. I'm smiling over here. I'm a hen. Come on over. Very portable. I mean, I think that was probably one of the biggest things that really helped. Turkey hunting was always something you did on the move. Sitting down at the base of a tree, walking back into the mountains or the hills or what have you. You were always going a ways because turkeys weren't as common perhaps as they are nowadays. So it was nice, especially if you were going to take the whole flock. It was nice to be able to fold them up, stick them in that pouch, or if you were lucky enough to have a vest to be able to get them back there. But probably the foam decoys, we had hard-sided, we had the homemade ones, we had some people that were stuffing the real thing when they were able to. But to be honest with you, the collapsible ones probably made them more common when they started out. Now, Jeff, you were kind enough to bring in out of the Rawlinson turkey hunting vault. He's got to make sure these things are safe at all times.
I lock them up. There's no question about that.
Well,
when you got to mortgage the house for a decoy, you don't just leave it out there. In fact, I keep it in the bag when I put it out there, when I stand it out there for the turkeys. I keep it in that bag. I don't want to get
Describe what you have here.
Well, I mean, these are just kind of some of the evolution, and there's better ones than these now, but this is just kind of some of the evolution in decoys. They're still a soft decoy. I mean, you can squish them, but the reality of it is they're much harder rubber. They're not necessarily plastic yet, but I'd say they're a much harder rubber. The detail, the painting detail, and the lifelike attributes of it are just incredible. And I think when it comes to decoys, one of the most important aspects is the face, the eyes, and the head. I think the rest of this could be a lot of different colors, a lot of different shades of turkey could give a rat's rear. But when it comes to the head, that's pretty darn important. And those eyes, they got to be able to see those eyes. And today they've just done a great. Get that foamy thing out again. You look at those eyes, and this is what I'm going to tell you. This is just incredible when it comes to decoys. Those eyes, there's just nothing there. But nothing there.
Just black paint on this one.
Yeah, you got these nice, beautiful kind of marble type eyes. Got a little shine to them there. They look like an actual eye glaring at you. I think that's pretty important.
So that's the hen decoy.
This is the hen.
That was the hen.
There's two evolutions here. Number one,
because you got to remember, not everyone's watching us on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. And this is the hen decoy. And of course, two evolutions here. One has certainly been the realism of the paint, right? I mean, this puppy here, I've walked out to my stand. This is embarrassing to say. I've walked out to my stand after taking a break and come back out and see my own decoy and about peed my pants. Oh, no. Oh, it's my decoy. Because they look so real. I mean, they look so absolutely real. So that's the first evolution. The second evolution, which I think is even more important, has been posture. And we are finally getting decoys that have what I would call good posture.
Finally, now, how old are these decoys?
Oh, these are, I don't know, maybe 10 years old already. Maybe 8 or 10 years old. As soon as this one came out, it had just about everything that I was in my head saying needed to have. And I was just shocked that someone was, looking at this from that standpoint, and I bought it. I was hooked on this thing. And it's worked. We can talk about efficacy and how that's maybe changed over the last several years, but this puppy has worked. And I mean, this has just been my go-to. The posture is probably as important. Now, you look at the head here and you stand back 5 feet from this thing and it looks about as real as can be. If you were looking out in the field and saw it, other than the stake in the ground, you probably would not be able to tell the difference. The posture is what I think is important here, and this especially when it comes to Toms and Jakes. The posture is what is going to sell the deal or not. This turkey is a Jake turkey, and as you can see, of course, he's a little smaller bodied. He's got that little tuft of Jake beard there, and he doesn't look very intimidating. But what doesn't look very intimidating about him is his posture. He's humped up like he wants to strut, but he doesn't dare do it. He doesn't dare strut because he knows if he struts and tries to show off, some bigger Tom or even sometimes hens are going to pound him. And so he's trying to strut just a little. God dang it. He's trying to edit that out.
732. We'll have to write that down.
Son of a bitch. That's my boss.
Yeah.
Hold on just a second. Hey, Christy, can I call you right back? We're shooting a podcast here.
Can you mark that somehow?
Okay, thanks. Bye. Okay, so anyway, I got to call her back.
All right, so where did...
All right, ready?
Yeah.
So the posture is, take two. The posture is on these are really, really important because they're not overly aggressive. Jakes are not the easy kick around bird that people think they are. Jakes can be menacing. They can be rude. And you get 2 or 3 together and they're like little gangsters. I mean, they can rule a field. They can send big Toms packing. And so to have a Jake that he wants to strut, but he's not because he's a little intimidated. He's trying to be a little shy. That can really be a trigger some aggressive reactions in Tom. So I really like this design, this style. So the posture is important. Hens have come a long ways. They're more subtle in the changes we've seen in hen decoys, but having those erect hens that are they're not looking scared, they're just looking inquisitive. Big difference. Some of our hen decoys of yesteryear, they just had their heads up looking just like, like somebody like a shotgun just gone off, And so they look pretty scared. These look just inquisitive. We got feeding hens with their heads to the ground. I like feeding hens. If I'm getting another hen, it's going to be a feeding hen. And I'll tell you why right now. When that head's on the ground, he doesn't have any concern. That Tom doesn't think, why isn't she looking at me? Well, of course she's not looking at him. She's feeding, so he's going to get closer. So I like those different postures in the hens as well.
They've definitely come a long way. This is kind of this is the upper end. There's no doubt about it. Even if you say they're 10 years old, they're not making turkeys look a whole bunch better.
Yeah,
be quite
honest. I might add lipstick to this one here now and then. Other than that, I don't make any difference.
Jackson and Hunter, where do your decoys kind of fall in between the foam one that I found here in the office and these heirloom quality decoys right here? These are going to be passed down. I know.
Well, my daughter's name is on them already.
They're in the will.
I'm kind of in the middle. I haven't gone to the full end of the spectrum yet on the price point, but definitely enough to make them realistic. They're not the foam decoys anymore. They're kind of that, like you said, soft plastics that hold their shape. But you can find them. I mean, I think my hen decoy was $30, and that's the one I've always got with me, no matter what. I've got a full strutting one, an old Primos that was, again, probably $30-$40. I slapped a Jake tail fan on it, and that's been really good to me. Other than the stakes, the one thing that gets me with decoys is I gotta have a nice simple stake setup.
Can we just address that elephant in the room?
Might as well.
$100 decoy, $120, $180, whatever they cost now is almost silly, but we'll pay for these darn
I
things.
bet you can get $200 or $300.
Well, I've seen big strutting toms that you really just you have to put a down payment on and go into a loan program. But anyway, the stakes on that, I agree. Yep. There's two things that a stake has to do. It has to hold the bird upright, and it has to hold the bird orientation. There's two things it has to do, and very few of these darn things do either one of them very well. Mm-hmm. These things, and if you lose them, they're hard to find too. But this should have some sort of a flag. Anyway, these things here, I wouldn't say they're flimsy, but on the same token, I've had to replace them more than once from a tom or a Jake getting on top and smacking on my hand, beating her up, and bending the steel rod. Mm-hmm. And the orientation, this little rubber stopper here is supposed to hold it from moving in the wind, and I mean, it just doesn't work like that.
My Jake decoy, actually, I mean, it's basically the same form as this one here, but it's got a shock cord. I don't know if yours has a shock cord.
No, it doesn't. I paid more and I don't have a shock cord.
Yeah, so the shock cord really makes it nice to where I can, in the wind, it gets some really nice movement where it goes. It's probably got about a 45-degree range of motion.
I'd like that.
And it's really nice. The hen decoy I have, the stake never leaves the turkey, so it's got a little piece of shock cord on it, and there's basically it kind of folds up into the decoy, and then you pull it out, attach it to the decoy, and so that's been really nice. I really like that hen decoy a lot. And then I've also got a lay down hen, which I really tend to use.
That's an interesting one too.
Yep.
Just the other day, I had a young kid out. We were turkey hunting, and we watched the coolest thing. The toms were fighting, and the hen, she was trying to run in front of the tom and then lay down real fast. Mm-hmm. And he'd literally jump over her to get to those toms because they were really fighting. And she'd run back in front of him again and jump down real fast. And I was like, boy, she is absolutely hot to trot on this old deal. He wasn't. He was looking to fight. But that laying down hen, and there's just such a look to him. Yep. And their feathers just kind of flutter over their body a little bit. There's such a look.
And we'll get to you, Hunter, I promise.
Oh, I believe it.
I think it's one of those things that with the lay down hen decoy, you got to have a Jake nearby. Mm-hmm. Because hens lay down for a lot of reasons. Breeding is one of them. Yeah. And this time of year, that's pretty important. But at the same token, they still dust themselves. They're still, nesting. They still just, they rest on the ground too. If we've had some of the wind through the nights like we've had, they're not getting a lot of rest up in those trees. They're fighting that quite a bit. So they come down and you'll see them, especially in the wintertime. They'll squat down and sleep on the ground after they've flown down and buried themselves in. So you've got to have something else to help tell the story. She's down on the ground. That Jake or that gobbler decoy is coming up to tread. So a lot of neat things there. And it goes back to the posture that we were talking about. A lot of different options nowadays. So Hunter, what do you got?
I think I guess first to start off, I'm kind of middle ground, probably lower middle ground in terms of what decoys I use. The soft-sided plastics are primarily my go-to Primos. That being said, like you've all kind of hit on here, is the stake debacle, and this decoy
that's
here.
What it is.
It's a debacle. I like
for those who can see it. Which I like about these is you got a stake holder. I like to, carry my decoys in my vest if I can. And the one thing for decoys that don't have like a underneath the tail feather holder for your stake is those stakes are rattling around, making a lot of noise too. So I've been thinking about upgrading just for that factor because I'm walking around with those decoys in my vest and making noise. But beyond broken stakes, the decoys spinning on them, that's something. If the turkey decoy industry is listening, that's where the room for improvement is.
Well,
right?
Please,
we got real decoys now. Let's just get the stake right.
I mean, we've got decoys that look better than the birds themselves. Yeah, There's going to be some, like these sitting here on the table, there are hens that are much uglier than this that are going to be sitting on eggs and hatching out poults here in a few more weeks. We've got
Agreed.
Jakes and Toms that don't look as nice as what we have here, especially after you shoot them. But I mean, it's kind of comes down to give some thought to the steak, even if it's only a day of development, right?
Yep. I want it to stay with the decoy.
Yes.
Because how many have you guys gotten out there and been steakless all of a sudden?
Oh,
Yes.
are you kidding me? This one was bought this year.
Yeah.
This already happened to me.
I was going to say, if I have, because it sounds like I have a similar steak that you do with the kind of like you said, that big shot cord underneath the half strut Jake that allows it to wobble. Lost that steak. You cannot find the identical replacement steak. I had to engineer a goose decoy steak to make it work, and it's about 6 inches too short on the inside of the turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But steakless, busted, all sorts of different things.
And here's the deal: replacing them, you wouldn't think is that big a deal because the steaks are going to cost like $7 or $8. They're not that expensive. It's the shipping. I'm here to tell you right now, it's 3 times that to get that little puppy to your doorstep, and it doesn't do you any good in South Carolina or wherever they're making them.
And unfortunately, a lot of these nicer ones are very specific on what steak they take.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you find. You can't find the universal ones that fit into that because they either have a cap or they're too skinny or they're too thick or there's all sorts of things that go wrong. So, all right, we've got everything from the beginning foam, and there's folks that still use those and have success. So we've got more of the upper end now that are going on, and that definitely works for getting the hunter to fork out to them. We all love decoys. Can I say that?
I think
we
that's
all enjoy the realism. We all love the turkey hunt, and we're going to spend time and money and energy on making sure that we have some things that we like and have confidence in, and off we go. We've all said there's times we don't even take them though.
Yep.
True. When is that?
Usually when I'm hunting in timber or in a creek
Thicker
bottom
timber?
where you want to make them look for it.
There you go.
All right.
I had that hunt a couple weeks ago where I could tell the bird could see the decoys, and but he wouldn't commit to the decoys, and I couldn't see him. So he quit looking. He sees the decoys. He's decided that she's not coming to him.
Come to me.
Yep, and so that was the end of that day. Where I think if I would have made him look for that hen a little harder, I probably could have gotten a shot.
Getting a step or two more is all it takes. Sometimes.
That being said, with the bow, I mean, you almost have to have them commit to the decoys. If they don't, it's
a little trickier.
Yeah, it makes it tough.
Yeah, I've had shot many a bird with the shotgun that hangs up at 30, 40 yards. But with a bow, I'm not taking that shot.
No. Well, and the nice thing with the bow, especially if you're hunting out of some type of blind or setup, even if it's a small sit-down type blind, you kind of want to plan where you're going to take the shot.
Oh, absolutely.
You want that shooting window and all lined up. And without a decoy, it's really hard to direct where they end up at. All right, Hunter, when do you forego the decoys?
Usually later in the season when I know those toms are breeding their hens, they're out looking for unbred hens, and they're likely, like Jackson said, they're less likely to be looking for the grouped up flock. They're more likely to be looking for that solo hen. You're making that noise and really make them look for that, and that's when I'm using no decoys or not having one out. Usually I like to have one with me at all times just in case I get to a scenario where I need it, but usually later in the season.
That's actually where those foam decoys come in handy, especially in a vest, because if you don't use them, they're extra cushion for your back. And if you do need them, you can pop them up pretty quickly at times. But I'm with you. Late season, especially as you get those hens that aren't going to breed. And that decoy can work against you because Tom's just going to say, like you said, Jackson, just like you experienced later in the season, it seems like they gobble, they see that decoy. If she's not coming and not showing any interest, boom, he's gone to go find one that is, because they're starting to be hens that, whatever reason, just aren't interested in anymore this year.
Yep.
Jeff?
Well, it's the same. Late season, especially as we get into mid-late May here in Nebraska, I won't even take a decoy a lot of times because I've had that happen where Tom comes out of the field, gobbles, and just walks off, and you're thinking, what the heck? But different types of decoys, different times of the season. I'll start off with like the Jake or Tom decoy, early season archery season in Nebraska, late March. The pecking order's getting established. They're really, I've seen it way too many times, way more interested in fighting than they are at these hens that are just throwing themselves in front of them. They care less. They want to fight. They want to beat up these other guys. And so as the season wears on, though, I'll start doing less of this stuff and more of the hens and 1 or 2 hens. And as the season wears on, just one hen, just a single hen, and then we get to the late season, nothing. So it really depends on time of season.
All right, now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes.
Okay.
why is it that it seems, and again, we're going to tell new hunters that, yep, these are great. And if you want to add them to your turkey hunting toolbox, please do. Because they can be a lot of fun, and they can be fun when birds really react to them positively in the hunter's terms. But it's not something that we say you gotta have. It's not right up there with, all right, you gotta have a permit, you have to be legal, you gotta have a shotgun that patterns well, or a bow and arrow that's able to take them, all that stuff, and you gotta have a place to hunt, and you gotta have some woodmanship and all that type of stuff, and maybe some calling skills. But decoys are probably one of the later must-haves on my list.
I would agree with you to a point, especially in Nebraska. A lot of the spots that are so open, I
have a hard time not using a decoy.
I have a very hard time not.
I think most turkey hunters have a hard time, especially if you pay $200 for a decoy. That sucker better be valuable all season long.
Well, that's not the question, though. I
No,
get
it's
your
not.
point, but
Thank you, Jackson.
yeah. So I don't know. I have a hard time.
Where does it fit in the have-to-have list then?
I think you're right. It is.
Don't do that, Jackson.
I know.
Jackson.
Well, you can't put it ahead
It's
of
tough.
You can't put, obviously, not
Everybody's
ahead of
got
the
to work with them
license.
still. Don't do that.
You can't put it ahead of the license. You can't. You got to have a method to take. You got to have calls.
Yeah,
I take that back. The way I hunt turkeys, you got to have calls.
Good point.
You can bushwhack them. You can. There's different methods, but my preferred method and the way I like to play the game. The decoys and the calls kind of go hand in hand. I can definitely see if you were in an eastern state where you're hunting them up and where it's really, you got a lot of topography, you got the timber. I can definitely see going no decoy on that. Yeah. The way we hunt them in Nebraska, field edges and stuff like that, unless you've got, even up in the Pine Ridge and stuff like that, the under canopy is so open.
Why not?
An understory, yeah. So
why not?
Especially the way we hunt them, the way I like to hunt them, a decoy is right there with the calls. I have a hard time forgoing it.
I said we like decoys.
I'm going to go with Jackson on this.
I think
same way.
Part of the strategy.
He agreed with me, so I like that.
Well, on your list on your list.
Well, then I'm not going Jackson. I think decoys are fairly important. And I can tell you why. I get back to my method of hunting, right? And I like birds in close. I like to watch them for a while. I don't just see a bird and shoot it. So therefore, good decoys hold birds. And from my experience, hold birds longer. Get them closer and hold them longer. At some point, they're going to get the gig is up. This hard shell rubber decoy just doesn't feel like the right thing. It doesn't move. It doesn't say anything. Something's not right. But man, you can have toms out there playing and strutting for 10 minutes, 15 minutes with these decoys. And I didn't have that kind of interaction with some of the old foamy stuff. So I really like these. And so for me, it's a must have. Now, first off is the permit. You got to have the permit, right? So that's not gear. That's just something you certainly have to make your contribution to conservation.
Got to have.
If you're going to take, you got to give. If you're going to take, you got to give. And but when it comes to the gun, you got to have the gun or the bow. I mean, that's a must-have. Do I need a blind? No. Do I need a call? Again, I agree with how you said that. For my style of hunting, yeah, I don't care to bushwhack turkeys. I'm sure a lot of turkeys I could have killed over the years if I'd have just gotten up, gone over and bushwhacked it, but that's not what I hunt for. So the call and the decoy pretty much go together for me as well.
I've been burned not having a decoy. I've been burned having the wrong decoy setup. So I could go either way here, but I'm going to give in to what you're saying. I think it depends regionally, the landscape. I think in like the southeast, northeast, they can get away a little bit more not having decoys. Nebraska, out west, I think, eyesight is the turkey's number one sense. But that can work against you too, like I said. So I would say one hen decoy, a must-have. Beyond that, optional.
Well, there you go.
that, yeah.
I think it's also the birds you chase, not just where you're chasing them, but and it's kind of back to that, but how much pressure they get as well. Because I think certain areas, they get used to decoys. And that kind of leads us into the meat and potatoes of what we're actually going to talk about. Are decoys becoming less effective?
Yes.
Because it's one of those things that I guarantee you, those foam ones that are uglier than the one I had up on the table before were amazing to watch the turkey's reaction to it when you first put those in action, and seeing a turkey's reaction to it, just like, wow, I'm never going to be without a decoy. And then as they kind of got used to those, It seemed like, you had to get more realistic. You had to get more different postures. And like you were talking about, Jeff, that the colors on the head are huge, especially on a gobbler's decoy. It's talking about aggression. It's talking about being subtle or submissive. That's all color related on the head. There's a reason that they are able to change that color so easily. And that's communication. And brought in a different decoy, helped. This half strutter, whatever you want to call it, semi-strut, huge. In fact, there was a time when I first had it, I think you guys are similar. If a gobbler saw that decoy, you knew he was coming in, right?
Yep.
It was just like, I'm not going to be without that decoy. And now lately, it seems like I leave that decoy home a little bit more than I ever thought I would, just because I've started seeing toms give that one Jake decoy a wider berth. And I do think it has to do with a couple of things. One, like you said, Jakes can cause troubles and all that stuff. But I want to know, what are you guys' thoughts? Are decoys becoming less effective? And Jeff, you shot it right out, yes.
I think they are at times. I agree with these Jake decoys 10 years ago. I mean, heck, you hardly had to throw it on the stake. Just throw it out there and go sit down. Hens and toms come right up to this decoy and just beat him up. And today I don't get that reaction as much. Now, again, less turkeys to go around maybe, so I'm not seeing that as often as I once did. But, there is maybe that idea that, in any given pasture, any given location, there's only going to be so many birds, right? And say there's 4 or 5 toms in that pasture, and you're going to shoot which ones? You're probably going to be always every year shooting the ones that they hear a call and come running to it. Now, the other 2 or 3, they don't ever hardly respond to the hen. They just let the hens come to them. They figured it out. And so they don't come running in and getting their head shot off. So therefore, they're there next year and the year after. Whereas the ones that keep responding to decoys, it doesn't take long for you to select for some of those in an area if you're taking 3 or 4 out of the 5 or 6 that are there every year.
It's an interesting thought. Yeah, can't disagree with it. I have noticed this year that I have gotten very little response to my decoys. I'm not sure what it is this year. We kind of had some colder temperatures, but I've had turkeys skirt them. I've used both the full strut and my full strut Jake and my half strut Jake, and gotten some pretty mixed reactions. I haven't had a single bird come in yet and take a swing at it, which is odd. Usually, usually it's by this time it's I've gotten at least one or two good reactions out of a bird. The 2 birds I've shot so far, I killed because I talked to the hens. Yeah, they've kind of been flocked up, and so that's been the strategy that's been winning for me. So I find it hard to say why. I mean, I could say it with geese because geese, they see it. They see it multiple times a year. They're living for many, many years, some of them. I mean, banding data shows that. But, turkeys, an old tom is 3 or 4 years old. So, he can see a lot in that time frame, but not nearly as many spreads as a goose.
I'll toss this out. You're exactly right on the age, and this is where it kind of gets interesting, is are they getting used to seeing them and associating them with danger? When we have that conversation, we always think about the gobbler. We always think, well, did he get shot at? Did he get if shot? It's kind of like the end of the learning curve, right? Mm-hmm. And Jeff, you even mentioned that in the harvest. I think what you're taking out of the equation is what that tom and that gobbler's chasing all spring long, who probably has a little bit longer life expectancy. I'm not sure, but it's learned responses with turkeys. And those hens, if they lead them in a different direction away from the decoys, if they've had a bad experience around them or in that location, I think they're just as much of a reason that gobblers won't come into the decoys. Now that's only when they're with the toms, obviously. But it's one of those things. Those traits are getting passed on. Those reactions to different things are getting passed on to poults and all that type of stuff. And there's a reason that they're able to survive like they do. So that hen component out there, I think, happens. Because we always think, well, we shot him. Why would he be scared of it? Or, if you get multiple birds, that one is. But like you said, he doesn't live long. It's not like they're going to be there for 10 years like some geese are. But those hens can be a component we don't think of.
I agree. That's additive. I think that's a reason. So, that's another reason.
I'm thinking of this in terms of, how variable breeding behavior is year to year. And as hunters, are we not adjusting our decoy setups appropriately with the seasons too? I mean, it's got to be multiple factors here. Right. But I think you make a good point with the hens. I think there's, hens that come into a setup without toms too that have that experience, with a certain decoy setup, a certain look, and later on maybe they're with a tom and they avoid that as well. But I'd like to look at it from that perspective of
So how many of you are similar in the fact of what I do? If I go into an area farm, I start in the morning, and I have got birds talking, but I can't close the deal, and I've got all day to chase them. So I relocate and different this. Do you guys vary up your turkey calls that you use?
Yes.
Or do you stick with the same call that didn't work this morning?
I'll vary my calls and my
Very
decoys.
And that's where I was going, is I think throwing out different decoy spreads can be big, just like throwing out different calls and different sounding calls, just to give it a change. I think hunters, we're no different than any other humans out there. We get stuck in a rut. We go to this spot. We sit by this tree, or we pop up the blind in this area, and we use the same decoy spread, and we expect the same results when it worked for us, and it doesn't. And then just kind of like, well, do I need different decoys? Do I need a different call? It just, at times, you can't go to the same spot and expect the same results.
Yeah,
because those birds,
crazy.
they make a living staying alive, and they are oftentimes, I believe it's been called sight learning. Turkeys are really good at remembering, all right, danger was in this spot. I'm avoiding this spot.
Yep. I bet you if I asked you guys, what does a turkey see on average when he comes into a call, I bet we could all say the same thing. He sees a great big blob with some black, and then he sees a hen, and then about 3 or 4 feet behind, he sees a jake.
Could be.
I think that's probably what 90% of our turkeys see when they come into a call. So I think that gets played out a little more than it needs to be. It's like waterfowl. If you're out enough, study what you see. Study what you see out there. Just like waterfowl, different times of the year you're going to set up a different spread because you're seeing different interactions. Sometimes it's really tight knit family groups. Other times it's just monster spreads. It really depends. And I don't think when it comes to turkey hunting we've thought about it in that regard yet. That early season more decoys. More males next to each other looking aggressive versus chasing the hens when they haven't seen a male yet chase a hen because they're busy fighting, and we think, well, this has got to be the first one they're going to see a male chasing a hen. Well, that doesn't make sense in late March, early April. So, I think we've got to be a little smarter on how we put those spreads together. But it's so easy to get in that rut because it can never be wrong to have a hen with a turkey being another turkey chasing her.
No, and it's one of those things that, especially as you get into these types of things, you got a bag, you got something else to carry, and setting up and moving and setting up, it's hard to carry decoys you're not going to use once you get to that point. So it's kind of, what do you do with them? You set them out and you try to maybe set them up a little bit different, but I think it is one of those that, of all the animals that we try to pattern as hunters, the easiest one to pattern is hunters. Mm-hmm. We park in the same spot, we walk the same trail we do, and we try to recreate some of that type of stuff. But it's part of the challenge and part of the fun. But I'd have to agree that over time, and especially if they've gotten hunted, and it's not just because of the decoys. I think there's a whole bunch of things there as well. You find that birds that once they've been hunted a few times, either in that season or over a few seasons, less responsive to calls. Yep, makes sense for them to be less receptive to decoys. I think you start seeing some of those birds going back to, this is what keeps me safe. I gobble, the hens come here. Right. I gobble. If they're interested, they'll find me type thing.
Going back to sight picture, I mean, when you guys go into, go to set up your blind, set up your decoys, what is your process? I'm going to let you answer before I do. Do you set up your blind, go to your blind spot first, set up your blind, and then go set up your decoys? Or do you go find your spot, set up your decoys, and go set up your blind? And this likely depends on your type of hunting too, but because we have to look at it from our perspective as hunters, how we're seeing those decoys, where our shooting lanes are, where we expect those birds to come, and then two, what are the turkeys seeing? So I'm interested to hear how you do it. And it probably depends on your, where you have access to hunt.
Great question, Jackson.
That is a great question. I usually set up my decoys. I've usually got a general area of where my blind's going to go. But I put up the decoys first, anticipating where the bird's going to come from. Usually I'm wrong. I'll put that out there. But I try to anticipate.
The fun of turkeys.
Yeah. Usually try to anticipate where they're coming from. It's a little easier when they're on the roost, but usually the decoys go out first with a little bit of thought process to where they're coming from. And then the blind goes, or wherever I'm sitting, or the blind goes up where I have a decent hide, more so on the hide if I'm just sitting there, and with a good field of view of those turkeys or my decoys and where I am hoping the turkeys will come from.
Well, Jackson's on the board with 2 birds this year, so maybe we should.
Wow, going there already.
Wait a second. We're not going to start relating harvest numbers to,
it's not all about
how
harvest.
good a hunter you are. No, we're not going to do
right.
that. We wouldn't have much to debate here. I'm similar in that when I pop up a blind, though, I'll get the blind set up first. Because usually I'm going to be hunting with somebody. I set up the blind and then the decoys.
Every time.
But if I'm sitting on the ground doing it old school, I am definitely putting the decoys out and then setting down. I hadn't really thought about that other than I have gotten into a habit. And this is probably having kids that have been turkey hunting with me. I've gotten into the habit of pacing off about 20 to 23 big, steps, which I see as yards, from the corner of the blind or where I want to be able to see as the front window to where I put my decoys. So they're just about, anywhere from 18 to 22, 23 yards out. So if anything stops at, 10 yards beyond or closer, they're in range, but they're not too close with the shotgun. With the archery, I'm okay with them being really close within 10 yards. But I found that and that doesn't matter if you're turkey hunting or duck hunting or anything like that, distances seem farther in the dark.
Oh yeah.
And it's amazing how you're like, wow, I can barely see the blind from over this. Oh my goodness, I got to get closer. I can't shoot them at 50 yards. And you set it up, and then when the sun pops up, you're just like, my goodness, I wish that decoy had stopped rubbing up against the blind. That's kind of noisy. So I've made sure that I did that. Plus, with my kids growing up, when you said go put the decoys out, you don't realize that you're not giving them any other instructions than go put the decoys out. And sometimes they do just that. They put them out, and they got all sorts of weird arrangements they'll do. They might be anywhere from 3 foot to 40 yards. It just kind of depends on their mood. So I made them start pacing it off so we had a good idea, bow or shotgun, how far away they were. But other than that, when sitting on the ground, it just seems like I can adjust enough with whatever I'm using. Jeff?
I'm the same way. I set up the blind and go put the decoys out, and that's the last thing I do. And because I'll set up the blind, and then like I've done this before. I'll throw the decoys out, then come set up the blind and get in there. Crap, it's not right. Then I got to pull up some stakes and readjust the blind. This way, once I get the window set up the shooting window, I turn around and I take my 15, 20 steps, stick my decoy in the ground, and come back.
I've never had this happen, but I had more than 1 or 2 Nebraska turkey hunters early on, Hunter, tell me this, that turkey hunting, most of these guys don't still turkey hunt. They said it was too easy. They said that they'd see a turkey, and so they'd go and set their decoy up and turn around to walk and sit down at a tree. And he said, before I sat down, that gobbler was already attacking the decoy or trying to mount the hen or what have you. And one guy said, I got out my call while that Tom's going to town on my decoys and made a yelp just so I could say I called him in. But he said otherwise it was just boom. They came running to the decoys. To me, once you get those decoys set, there's a chance, not necessarily a good chance. There's a chance that bird's going to come in and you are hunting. And so I'm always they're the first thing that gets picked up too. Because if I don't want them to see me, I don't want them to associate those fakes with a hunter.
Yep. Totally. See, I'm the same way. Get them out of business. I don't want them in business. If I'm not hunting, I don't want a bird to come over a hill and see me with those decoys. And I know that sounds silly, but I don't.
We're together. There we go. Old guys stick together.
I haven't had that problem. I guess it wouldn't be a problem, but I haven't had that happen yet.
So we're not like you young guys. We can't run out there and grab them real quick. It's an event for us, so we go get them done right away.
I do a little. I wouldn't say both, but I like to find my area first. Go to where I'm gonna set up my blind or set up to sit. Lay my gun down, lay my bow, whatever, down there, blind down there, and then go out, set my decoys out, come back, and do my final setup there. So I guess it's a mix of both, because I'm able to pace out then too, where I want them from my spot. But
neat.
It's just interesting, until you go out with somebody and see the way they do it. It's, you do it the way you were taught. Or
We're patternable. So I want to know too. So we kind of agreed a little less effective. Is there anything you guys do differently that helps? Mixing up the decoy look. We talked a little bit about that. Is there anything that you do non-traditional?
I've done it a couple of times, but I haven't in recent years. But attach a string to the decoy and get a little
Okay.
movement.
Make a move.
So yeah, I had a decoy that I took a little screw with an eye on it, put it on the tail, underneath the tail, and then I had another
Spin it
stake
around
with an
and move
eye.
it. I've heard a lot of guys do. I don't, but I've heard a lot. You know what intrigues me, and I haven't done it yet, though, is those guys that put those remote control cars and put their decoy on that car so they can drive it around, you know. I just got to think that would be fun. If you see a bird over there, you just drive it over there, turn it around, and just slowly come back, bring that bird right to your blind. That's getting a little too techie. Of course, I wouldn't do that, but I think that sounds funny. Nothing too crazy. You know, snoring. When the decoys are out, snoring is totally acceptable. It brings birds in, and the beauty of decoys, even when I'm not calling, I can sit there and close my eyes, relax. The decoys are working for me. If a tom's walking by, he sees those decoys, a lot of times they'll gobble at them right off the bat. Oh my God! That's your wake up call. You get one gobble to wake up and get ready. Usually,
I wouldn't say I have anything specific to decoys. I like to lay, not fully lay down, but if I'm hunting on the base of a tree, if I'm setting up, not in a blind on the base of a tree, I like to be more in a kind of 3/4 lay down position with my shoulders against the tree. So just sit up, try to find an elevation above those decoys so I have a good view, set up for a good nap. Good comfortable position to sit for a while. And
napping is important. So don't overlook napping.
I think a tall guy can get away with that. If I tried to go and lean with just my shoulders, 5 inches of grass and I'd be out of the game. Especially they could be there. And
you and I probably wouldn't be able to breathe if we were laying down like that.
I will throw out there, don't always put the decoys directly in between. If you found a gobbler that's gobbling, or where those birds are at, don't put that decoy directly between you and the birds.
That's a good point.
And I don't think this is novel in any term, but just definitely something to think about. You don't want those turkeys approaching directly where you're directly behind what they're keying in on.
Yep, that's a good point.
I usually have a little bit of an angle, maybe not a hard 90 degree, but at least a little bit to where I'm out of their line of sight.
And I think some of the original pop-up blind manufacturers suggested that, is have it to where the blind's kind of blocking their view, especially if they're over this hill, they're like set up in this tree, that they've got to come around the blind to get to them. Kind of hadn't thought about that in a while. One thing that I've done last few years with success, and including this year, is if I'm going to use a Jake decoy, I always notice that, and I'm not sure I'm alone on this, when I have decoys out, that I'm going to keep them together. I've got 3 decoys, I got 4 decoys, I got 2 decoys, I'm going to keep them together. There's no reason to do that. I started spreading them out just a little bit. Now, if I've got a Jake that's in partial strut, I'm going to put him over with a hen. But I'm also about 20 yards away from them, put another hen or 2 so that I can kind of give them some more space. So they're kind of together, but they're not just clumped together. Spacing, especially in Canada geese, I think is important, more so than what hunters usually give them. But here, if they're nervous about that Jake, there's still some other hens that they can get to without bumping into that Jake or having to deal with that Jake. And I've seen that have some work or success where that Tom will come in. He doesn't want to mess with that Jake, but he's far enough away that he can come to these hens over here and still within shotgun range. Because get them spread out, give him some options. If he wants to take that Jake on, hey, that's in range too. He can be my guest. But if he wants to go to those 2 hens over there by themselves and not deal with the Jake, great. He's in range too. So we're ready to go.
Yep.
This has been a good discussion. I've enjoyed it.
I like it. But the one thing we'll go through, even though we've kind of decided a little less effective, I don't think any of us are giving them up. No.
Not anytime soon.
They are still, when they work, folks, lots of fun.
Absolutely.
Hard to beat it. So I think we're going to have to put a ribbon on it right there. So give us an idea what you guys do with decoys or what you've seen as far as effectiveness as well in the comments down below. But otherwise, be safe out there. Have a great turkey season. Until next time. So I want to know, what's the next evolution?
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.